Return the money. My mother's voice cut through the bank lobby like a knife through silk. Her perfectly manicured nails drummed against the marble counter as she glared at me with the kind of contempt usually reserved for criminals. My stepfather Derek stood beside her, his face already flushing that dangerous shade of red I'd learned to recognize over the past 3 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma, don't make this harder than it needs to be. His voice dropped to that low rumble that preceded violence. That inheritance belongs to the family. Your grandmother would have wanted us all to benefit. I stood there in my thrift store jeans and faded jacket, laptop repair kit slung over my shoulder, looking exactly like what they believed me to be. A 34-year-old failure who fixed computers for $75 an hour while living in a 400-square-foot studio apartment. The disappointment daughter who'd wasted her potential on coding instead of finding a rich husband like her mother had. Twice. What they didn't know, what nobody in that bank lobby could have guessed, was that the $2.8 million they were demanding I return was pocket change compared to what I actually had. That the modest IT repair shop I ran in Beaverton was a front. That I owned the cybersecurity company protecting half the Fortune 500 from hackers. That while they saw a struggling tech support girl, I was actually the founder and CEO of Quantum Shield Security, a company worth $450 million. My name is Emma Carter, and I learned a long time ago that the best defense isn't a firewall. It's being completely underestimated. The morning my grandmother died started like any other Wednesday. I was in my repair shop, extracting data from a water-damaged hard drive, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. The lawyer's voice was professional but warm as he explained that Margaret Carter, my father's mother, had passed peacefully in her sleep at 92. He needed me to come to his office in Lake Oswego to discuss her will. I hadn't seen my grandmother in almost a year, not since the awkward Thanksgiving dinner where Derek had monopolized the conversation with stories about his real estate empire while my mother nodded along like a bobblehead. Gran had caught my eye across the table and winked, a gesture so small that nobody else noticed. She knew. She'd always known that I was more than what I appeared to be. The lawyer's office smelled like old books and furniture polish. Marcus Webb had been handling Gran's affairs for 30 years, and he looked at me with something close to approval as I settled into the leather chair across from his desk. Your grandmother spoke of you often, he said, sliding a folder across the polished wood. She was very specific about her wishes. Inside was a letter in her spidery handwriting and legal documents that made my breath catch. She'd left me everything. The house in Eastmoreland, her investment portfolio, and $2.8 million in liquid assets. The letter was short and devastating in its clarity. Emma, my darling girl. Your father saw your brilliance when you were just 6 years old, tapping away at that old computer in his study. He would be so proud of what you've become, even if others are too blind to see it. This money is yours alone. Not for Linda, who chose status over loyalty. Not for that blowhard she married. Yours. Use it wisely, or foolishly, or not at all. The choice, like everything else in your remarkable life, is entirely yours. Love always, Gran. I sat in that office for 20 minutes after Marcus Webb left me alone with the documents, staring at words written by a woman who'd understood what my own mother never could. That value wasn't measured in designer handbags or the size of your husband's investment portfolio. That being underestimated was sometimes the greatest gift you could receive. The problem started when the estate announcement went public 3 days later. Small local paper, just a notice in the obituaries section mentioning the bequest. But my mother had always read the death notices religiously, mining them for social opportunities and networking possibilities. She called within an hour. Emma, sweetie. Her voice dripped with false warmth. I just heard about Gran. I'm so sorry for your loss. Pause for effect. I understand she left you some money. Of course, as family, we should discuss how to handle this responsibly. I was in my real office when she called, 42 floors above Portland in the U.S. Bancorp Tower, reviewing security protocols for a new government contract. Through my windows, the city spread out like a circuit board, all connections and possibilities. My assistant, James, had already flagged the call as potentially problematic based on voice stress analysis. The software I designed could detect deception in real time, measuring microvariations in tone and cadence. The readout showed spikes in every marker for manipulation and greed. I switched my voice to the slightly uncertain tone I used with family, the one that suggested I was grateful for guidance from my betters. "It's really Gran's decision, Mom. I'm just following her wishes." Her laugh was sharp. "Darling, you can't possibly manage that kind of money alone. Derek has wonderful investment advisors. We could help you make it grow, keep it in the family." What she meant was keep it in her control, where she could skim off it like she'd tried to skim off everything my father had left me 12 years ago. Back then, I'd been 22 and heartbroken, and she'd nearly succeeded. Now I was 34 and running a company that processed $3 billion in transactions annually. The difference in perspective was almost amusing. "I'll think about it," I lied, watching the deception markers spike on her end too. We were both liars, but only one of us knew the full truth. The confrontation at the bank happened 5 days later. I'd gone to First National to transfer the inheritance into one of my holding accounts, a routine transaction that should have taken 15 minutes. I was standing at the counter, wearing my usual costume of faded denim and a jacket with a coffee stain on the sleeve, when I heard my mother's voice behind me. There she is. Linda Carter Hammond, all 5'6" of her, dressed in what she thought was understated wealth. Tory Burch flats, Michael Kors bag, jewelry that sparkled just a little too brightly to be truly expensive. Derek loomed behind her in a suit that screamed trying too hard, all shoulder pads and aggressive tailoring. The bank lobby went quiet. Other customers pretended not to watch while absolutely watching. The teller helping me froze, clearly sensing drama about to unfold. "Mom, Derek." I kept my voice level. "This isn't really the place for this." Derek stepped forward, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woody and overpowering. "You've been avoiding our calls. We need to talk about that money. You're making a mistake, keeping it all to yourself. It's my inheritance." The words came out quieter than I intended. "That's where you're wrong." His voice rose, drawing more attention. "Your grandmother was family to all of us. That money should be shared. Your mother has expenses, responsibilities. You wouldn't even know how to invest it properly." I noticed the bank manager emerging from his office, concern creasing his face. Security guard shifting his weight near the door. My mother placed a hand on Derek's arm, playing the peacemaker while her eyes remained hard as diamonds. "Emma, please. Be reasonable. We're not asking for all of it. Just half. Derek's been having some cash flow issues with his properties, and Kristen needs help with her brand development. Tyler's cryptocurrency venture is so close to breaking through. We're family. We help each other." The "we help each other" was rich, considering my mother hadn't helped me with a single thing since my father died. Hadn't come to his memorial because she was too busy dating Derek. Hadn't asked about my business or my life or anything beyond whether I'd met anyone worth marrying yet. "I already told you," I said, aware that everyone in the lobby was now openly staring. "Gran left the money to me. Her wishes were very clear." That's when Derek's hand shot out and grabbed my arm. The grip was painful, fingers digging into flesh hard enough to bruise. His face was inches from mine, breath hot with rage and something else. Desperation, maybe. Fear. "Listen to me, you ungrateful little bitch. Your grandmother was senile. That will can be contested. But if you're smart, you'll return half that money right now. Transfer it to your mother. Consider it repayment for everything she's done for you." The bank had gone completely silent. The teller reached for her phone. The security guard started moving toward us. But I stayed perfectly still, meeting Derek's eyes with a calm I'd learned in boardrooms facing down executives twice his size and 10 times as smart. "Let go of my arm." My voice was quiet but clear. Every word enunciated. For a moment, I thought he might actually hit me. his free hand clenched into a fist. My mother gasped, whether in genuine shock or performative horror, I couldn't tell. The security guard was 3 steps away. Then Derek's phone rang. He released my arm to grab it, barking a hello that echoed through the marble lobby. I watched his face change as he listened, color draining from red to gray to something close to green. He lowered the phone slowly, staring at it like it had transformed into a snake. What is it? My mother's voice pitched higher. Derek, what's wrong? The SEC. His voice cracked. They're at the office. Something about fraudulent property listings and investor complaints. They want me to come in immediately. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sympathy. Just the cold recognition that the walls were beginning to close in, right on schedule. Because what my family didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that I'd been watching. Monitoring. Documenting. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. For 3 years, since the moment Derek Hammond had entered our lives with his fake smile and his real debts, I'd been tracking every shady deal, every inflated listing, every investor he'd scammed with promises of guaranteed returns. I hadn't reported him. I'd simply ensured that the right information found its way to the right people at exactly the right time. The SEC was very responsive when you handed them a comprehensive dossier of securities violations tied up with a bow. My mother clutched at his sleeve. This is a mistake. Call Marcus, call the lawyer. This is just a misunderstanding. But Derek was already moving toward the door, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in urgent whispers. My mother hesitated, torn between following him and finishing what she'd started with me. In the end, maternal instinct lost to self-preservation. She hurried after her husband without another word, her Tory birch flats clicking frantically against the marble floor. The bank lobby exhaled collectively. The teller looked at me with wide eyes. Are you okay? Should we call the police about the assault? I rubbed my arm where Derek's fingers had left red marks that would purple by evening. I'm fine. Just family drama. Can we finish the transfer? She nodded, fingers flying over her keyboard with renewed efficiency. Within minutes, the $2.8 million was safely distributed across accounts that existed under corporate entities my family would never connect to me. The inheritance was secure, transformed from individual wealth into just another asset in a portfolio they couldn't begin to comprehend. As I left the bank, stepping out into the gray Portland morning, I pulled out my phone and sent a single message to James. Phase 1 complete. Initiate monitoring on the stepfamily accounts. I want real-time updates on all financial movements. His response came immediately. Already running. Tyler Hammond attempted 3 cash withdrawals this morning, all denied for insufficient funds. Kristen Hammond's credit cards are maxed. Derek Hammond's assets are frozen pending investigation. I walked to my decades-old Honda Civic, the car I drove to maintain my cover, and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment. Through the windshield, the city looked the same as always. Coffee shops and boutiques, people hurrying to jobs and lives I'd never be part of. But underneath, in the digital infrastructure I'd helped build and protect, everything was changing. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Tyler, my stepbrother, who I'd spoken to maybe 5 times in 3 years. Emergency family meeting tonight. Mom's house. 7 p.m. Be there. I didn't respond. Instead, I started the car and drove to my repair shop, where Mrs. Chen was waiting with a laptop that wouldn't boot. She smiled when I walked in, trusting and grateful for the affordable help I provided. She had no idea that the same hands fixing her computer for $75 had just authorized a $12 million infrastructure upgrade for a telecommunications company. That was the beauty of it. The perfect disguise. While my family scrambled and panicked, demanding money they thought I couldn't afford to keep, I would continue fixing computers in Beaverton, living in my studio apartment, driving my old Honda. And when the time was right, when they'd hit bottom hard enough to finally see clearly, I would show them exactly who Emma Carter really was. But not yet. Not today. Today I would let them wonder why I hadn't shown up to their emergency meeting. Let them call and text and leave increasingly frantic voicemails. Let them feel, just for a moment, what it was like to be ignored by someone they'd spent years dismissing. The game had only just begun, and unlike them, I knew all the rules. The emergency family meeting I didn't attend apparently lasted 3 hours. I know this because Tyler sent me 14 increasingly hostile text messages documenting every minute of my absence. Each one painted a clearer picture of desperation than the last. Where are you? Mom is freaking out. Seriously, Emma, this is important. Derek might go to prison. You're being selfish. This affects all of us. The last one arrived at 10:30 p.m. We know you have the money. We know you're hiding something. This isn't over. I was in my real home when that final message came through, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Pearl District penthouse with a glass of wine I'd been too distracted to drink. The view stretched across the Willamette River to the industrial east side, lights reflecting on dark water like scattered code. My laptop sat open on the kitchen island, multiple screens showing the digital carnage of my stepfamily's collapsing empire. James had outdone himself with the surveillance feeds. Every bank account, every credit card transaction, every desperate phone call to lawyers and accountants. The software we developed for corporate espionage prevention worked beautifully in reverse when you knew exactly where to point it. Derek's situation was worse than even I'd anticipated. The SEC hadn't just frozen his accounts. They discovered a Ponzi scheme stretching back 6 years, fake property developments funded by new investors to pay off old ones. He'd bilked 73 people out of a combined $18 million. The house in West Lynn, the one my mother loved to show off to her book club friends, was mortgaged at 300% of its actual value. Tyler's cryptocurrency ventures were equally fictional. He'd been day trading with borrowed money, losing consistently, covering losses with cash advances from credit cards he'd opened using Derek's properties as false collateral. He was $200,000 in debt and the collection agencies were already circling. Kristen, my stepsister who called herself a lifestyle influencer, had built her entire brand on products she couldn't afford. Designer collaborations that were actually just PR samples she pretended to purchase. A skincare line she'd launched with investor money that never made it past the prototype phase. Her apartment in the Pearl, 3 blocks from mine though she didn't know I lived here, was 2 months behind on rent. And my mother. Linda Carter Hammond sat at the center of it all like a spider in a web made of maxed-out credit cards and social climbing that had finally reached its apex. She'd married Derek for his money without bothering to verify it was real. Now she was facing the consequences of choosing appearance over substance for the 3rd time in her life. My phone rang at 11 p.m. I almost didn't answer, but caller ID showed Marcus Webb, my grandmother's lawyer. His voice was strained when I picked up. Emma, I apologize for calling so late. Your mother and stepfather came to my office this afternoon with a lawyer. They're planning to contest the will. On what grounds? I kept my voice neutral, already knowing the answer. They're claiming undue influence. Suggesting you manipulated your grandmother in her final years, isolated her from family, took advantage of her declining mental state. Gran had the cognitive function of someone half her age until the day she died. I had the medical records to prove it, had made sure her doctor documented every interaction for exactly this reason. I'm aware, Marcus said carefully. I told them as much. But they're desperate. Derek's assets are frozen and your mother has apparently discovered she's liable for his debts as a spouse. They need money and they think yours is easier to access than actually facing their problems. Let them contest it. I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. There was a pause. Emma, may I speak candidly? Off the record? Of course. Your grandmother told me something before she passed. She said you were playing a long game, that you'd become someone extraordinary while letting everyone believe you were ordinary. She was very proud of that. Whatever you're doing, whatever this is, she trusted you to handle it. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of that trust. Tell me what they'll need for the contestation. Financial records showing you had means and motive to manipulate her. Proof of isolation. Evidence she wasn't of sound mind. They won't find any of it, but they'll try. Discovery could get invasive. How invasive? They could subpoena your bank records, employment history, tax returns. Anything to prove you're not what you appear to be. There it was. The trap springing shut. If they demanded financial discovery, they'd uncover Quantum Shield. They'd find the corporate structures, the offshore accounts, the careful architecture of wealth I'd spent 12 years building. They'd see everything. Which meant I needed to show them first, on my terms, when the moment was right. Let them file the contestation, I said. I'll make sure my records are available. After hanging up, I pulled up the files James had prepared. Complete dossiers on each family member, documentation of every scheme, every lie, every moment of casual cruelty they'd inflicted while assuming I was too insignificant to remember. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously organized. But revenge wasn't the goal. It never had been. My father had taught me that when I was 8 years old, sitting in his study while he explained the difference between justice and vengeance. Justice, he'd said, was about balance. About ensuring people faced the natural consequences of their choices. Vengeance was about making them hurt. One built things. The other just burned them down. I wanted justice. I wanted my family to understand that dismissing someone's potential didn't make that potential disappear. It just meant you lost the privilege of witnessing its manifestation. The next morning brought new developments. I was at Carter Tech Solutions, my repair shop, replacing a cracked screen on a student's laptop when my mother walked in. She looked smaller without Derek beside her, older without the armor of expensive clothes. She wore jeans and a sweater I recognized from 5 years ago, back when my father was still alive and she hadn't yet traded authenticity for aspiration. Emma. Her voice was quiet. We need to talk. I set down my tools, nodded to the back office. The space was cramped, just a desk and 2 chairs surrounded by shelves of computer parts and diagnostic equipment. She sat carefully, hands folded in her lap like a schoolgirl called to the principal's office. I'm sorry about yesterday. At the bank. Derek was out of line. He assaulted me, Mom. In public. Over money that isn't his. She flinched. I know. I should have stopped him. I should have done a lot of things differently. This was new. Linda Carter Hammond didn't apologize. She justified, explained, redirected blame, but she never accepted responsibility for anything. Derek's in real trouble, she continued. The SEC found things. Bad things. The house is going to be seized. Everything we have is tied up in properties that apparently don't exist or investors who are filing lawsuits. I didn't know, Emma. I swear I didn't know any of it was fake. I studied her face, looking for the tells I'd learned to recognize. The slight tightening around her eyes when she lied, the way her left hand moved to her collarbone when she was manipulating. But I saw neither. Just exhaustion and something that might have been genuine fear. What do you want from me? I asked. The lawyer says we can contest Gran's will. That we might be able to prove she wasn't thinking clearly, that you influenced her decisions. But I don't want to do that. I know she left you that money because she loved you. Because you were there for her when I wasn't. Her voice cracked on the last words. I waited, letting the silence stretch. I want to ask you for a loan. $50,000. Enough to hire a real lawyer for Derek, to keep us from losing everything immediately. I'll pay you back, I promise. I'll get a job, I'll do whatever it takes. You haven't had a job in 20 years. Then I'll learn. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time in recent memory. Please, Emma. I know I've been a terrible mother. I know I chose Derek over you, chose status over substance, chose everything wrong. But I'm asking for help. Not demanding. Asking. I thought about the $50,000. What it meant to me versus what it meant to her. I spent more than that on server upgrades every quarter. It was a rounding error in my operational budget. But to her, it represented salvation from immediate disaster. I'll think about it, I said finally. Thank you. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Your father would have been proud of you. Running this business, taking care of yourself, staying grounded. He always said you had more integrity in your little finger than most people had in their whole body. The words hit harder than I expected. My father had been dead for 3 years, buried quickly and mourned briefly before my mother moved on to Derek's larger house and bigger promises. Hearing her invoke his memory now felt like sacrilege and salvation in equal measure. After she left, I sat in that cramped office for 20 minutes, staring at the wall where I'd hung my business license. Carter Tech Solutions, established 12 years ago with the $5,000 my father had left me. The seed money that had grown into quantum shield security while everyone assumed I was barely scraping by. My phone buzzed. James, with an update I'd been expecting. Kristen Hammond just posted on Instagram about financial abuse and toxic family members who refuse to help in times of crisis. No names mentioned, but the subtext is clear. Comments are mostly supportive. Should we monitor for escalation? I typed back quickly. Monitor but don't engage. Let her tell her story. Truth will surface eventually. The afternoon brought Tyler to my door. Unlike my mother's subdued approach, he barged in while I was helping an elderly man retrieve photos from a corrupted memory card. Tyler's face was flushed, hair uncombed, wearing wrinkled clothes that suggested he'd slept in them. We need to talk. Now. I'm with a customer. You'll have to wait. He glanced at the elderly man with barely concealed contempt. This is more important than someone's vacation pictures. The man bristled. Young man, these are photos of my late wife. They're the last ones I have. Tyler had the grace to look momentarily ashamed, but recovered quickly. Emma, please. 5 minutes. I finished extracting the photos, transferred them to a new card, and refused payment from the grateful widower. Only after he'd left did I turn to face my stepbrother. What do you want, Tyler? He paced my small shop like a caged animal. You know what I want. The same thing everyone wants. For you to stop being selfish and help your family. By giving you money I inherited from my grandmother? Money she specifically left to me? She was senile. Everyone knows it. That will is going to be overturned, and when it is, you'll get nothing. So you might as well help us now, voluntarily, and maybe we'll remember that when everything gets redistributed. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. Gran wasn't senile. She had full cognitive function until the end. Medical records prove it. Any contestation will fail and cost you legal fees you can't afford. His face darkened. You think you're so smart. Little Emma, fixing computers, living in your pathetic studio, driving that piece of junk car. You have no idea how the real world works. Enlighten me. The real world is about connections, about using what you have to get what you want. Derek taught me that. Yeah, maybe he cut some corners, but that's how you get ahead. You play it safe, you stay small. That's why you're stuck here while people like us are building empires. The irony of him saying this while his empire collapsed in real time was almost too much. I kept my expression neutral. Is Derek's empire still standing? Last I checked, the SEC had other ideas about his business practices. That's temporary. He'll fight it, prove it was all misunderstandings and accounting errors. But he needs capital to mount a proper defense. $200,000 would give him a real shot. I don't have $200,000, Tyler. Bullshit. You have almost $3 million from Gran. $200K is nothing. That money is in trust, being managed. I can't just withdraw it. The lie came easily, smoothly. I'd practiced this conversation in my head a dozen times, knew exactly how to play the role of someone overwhelmed by sudden wealth, uncertain about financial management, susceptible to pressure from people who claim to know better. Then take it out of trust. I stood up straighter. You're an adult, you can make that decision. Or is this about punishing us? About getting revenge for some imagined slight? Imagined? I kept my voice level. Tyler, in the 3 years since Mom married Derek, how many times have you spoken to me? Real conversations, not just demands or dismissals. He blinked, thrown by the question. I don't know. That's not the point. It's exactly the point. You don't know me. None of you do. You've spent years assuming I was insignificant, and now that I have something you want, suddenly I'm supposed to consider you family? We are family. Family shows up. Family asks about your life. Family doesn't just appear when they need money. He stepped closer, anger radiating from him like heat. You're going to regret this. When Derek beats these charges, when Tyler Coyne takes off, when we're back on top, you'll still be here fixing computers for old people. And we'll remember that you had a chance to be part of something bigger and you chose to be small. After he left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, I locked up early and drove to my real office. The contrast never failed to strike me. From the cluttered repair shop in Beaverton to the pristine executive floor in downtown Portland. From Emma the struggling tech support girl to Emma the CEO of a company that employed 12,000 people globally. James met me at the elevator with a tablet full of updates. The financial implosion was accelerating. Derek's lawyer had quit after discovering the depth of fraud involved. Kristen's landlord had filed eviction papers. Tyler's cryptocurrency accounts had been frozen by the exchange after suspicious trading patterns triggered fraud alerts. And through it all, my family continued to believe that I was their salvation. That poor, simple Emma would eventually cave to pressure and share her inheritance because that's what weak people did. They had no idea that I'd been preparing for this moment since the day my father died and my mother chose a con artist over her own daughter's grief. They didn't know that every slight, every dismissal, every casual cruelty had been catalogued and filed away. Not for revenge, but for clarity. So that when the moment came to reveal the truth, there would be no ambiguity about who had chosen this path. I stood at my windows as the sun set over Portland, turning the river into molten gold. Somewhere out there, my family was scrambling, panicking, blaming everyone but themselves for the consequences of their choices. Tomorrow, the next phase would begin. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The game was unfolding exactly as I designed it, each piece moving into position with the precision of well-written code. And unlike my family, I knew exactly what came next. The subpoena arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered to Carter Tech Solutions by a process server who looked apologetic about the whole thing. I accepted the envelope while Mrs. Patterson waited for her laptop, reading through the legal document with the same calm I'd used to review a software license agreement. Derek and Linda Hammond, represented by Whitmore and Associates, were officially contesting my grandmother's will. They wanted full financial disclosure, employment records going back 10 years, and testimony under oath about my relationship with Margaret Carter during her final months. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Perfect timing. I'd expected 2 months before they got their legal ducks in a row, but desperation made people efficient. Mrs. Patterson peered over her bifocals at me. Bad news, dear? Nothing I can't handle. I folded the subpoena and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Your laptop's ready. I replaced the hard drive and recovered all your files. She paid in cash, as always, adding an extra 20 as a tip I never accepted but she always insisted on. After she left, I locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and made my way through the back room to the hidden door that led to the real infrastructure of my operation. The basement level beneath Carter Tech Solutions wasn't on any building plans. I'd had it constructed during a supposed foundation repair 7 years ago, creating a secure space that connected via underground tunnel to a parking garage 3 blocks away. From there, an unmarked car service could take me to my real office without anyone seeing the transition. James was waiting in the monitoring room, multiple screens displaying real-time feeds of my family's continued deterioration. He looked up as I entered, eyebrows raised. They actually filed. His tone suggested he'd bet against it. I assumed they'd realize how badly Discovery could backfire. They're past the point of strategic thinking. I settled into the chair beside him, scanning the data. What's the latest? He pulled up financial records with practiced efficiency. Derek's legal defense fund is empty. He's burned through 3 lawyers in 2 weeks because he can't pay retainer fees. The public defender assigned to his SEC case has advised him to plead guilty and cooperate for a reduced sentence. And the others? Kristen moved back into Linda's house yesterday. The eviction went through and she had nowhere else to go. She's posting about it on social media, framing it as a voluntary choice to support family during hard times. Her engagement numbers are actually up. People love a redemption narrative. I studied the Instagram feed James pulled up. Kristen had pivoted her entire brand toward authenticity and struggle, documenting life after luxury with the same aesthetic polish she'd used for unboxing designer bags. The comments were sympathetic, supportive, completely unaware they were watching a performance of humility rather than the genuine article. Tyler? I asked. Tried to flee the country yesterday. Got stopped at the airport when his passport was flagged. Apparently he has outstanding warrants for fraud in 2 states we didn't even know about. He's currently in county lockup, bail set at $500,000. Which he doesn't have. Which none of them have. James pulled up a consolidated financial overview. Combined liquid assets for the entire family, including your mother, total less than $8,000. They're surviving on credit cards that are nearly maxed and the charity of friends who don't yet know the full scope of the disaster. I absorbed this information, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no sympathy, just the clinical assessment of data points aligning exactly as predicted. They'd built their lives on foundations of sand and debt, and now the tide was coming in. The will contestation is interesting though. James brought up the legal filing. They're claiming you isolated Margaret from family, manipulated her during vulnerable moments, and used your technical skills to intercept communications and forge documents. Pretty serious allegations. All disprovable with medical records, phone logs, and visitor documentation from her assisted living facility. Plus Marcus has affidavits from the nursing staff about how often I visited versus how often they visited. Right, but here's the thing. He leaned back, studying me with the analytical gaze that made him excellent at his job. Discovery goes both ways. They get to demand your financial records, but you get to demand theirs. Every transaction, every asset, every debt. It all becomes part of the court record. Which means Derek's fraud becomes public. Tyler's schemes get documented. Kristen's fake brand partnerships get exposed. And Mom's complicity in all of it becomes undeniable. Exactly. James nodded slowly. This isn't just about the inheritance anymore. This is about putting their entire lives under a microscope in open court. Are you sure you want that? I thought about my father, about the conversations we'd had in his study when I was young. He'd taught me that power wasn't about domination, it was about understanding systems well enough to navigate them perfectly. He'd shown me that the best solutions weren't always obvious, that sometimes you had to let problems unfold completely before the path to resolution became clear. Set up a meeting with Marcus Webb, I said finally. I want to make them an offer before the hearing. What kind of offer? The kind that gives them a choice. Continue with the contestation and face complete exposure, or accept help under specific conditions. You're still willing to help them? After everything? I'm willing to give them a chance to help themselves. There's a difference. The meeting happened 3 days later in Marcus Webb's conference room. I'd asked him to arrange it, to present it as his idea rather than mine. The family needed to feel like they were being offered a lifeline from a neutral party, not accepting charity from the daughter they dismissed. They arrived separately, each carrying the weight of their individual catastrophes. Derek came with his new public defender, a tired-looking woman who'd clearly explained the futility of fighting both the SEC and a will contestation simultaneously. Linda wore the same outfit I'd seen her in at my shop, her jewelry noticeably absent. Kristen had her phone out, probably filming content about family meetings during crisis. Tyler appeared via video call from jail, his face gaunt and gray. Marcus opened with formalities, then got to the point. I've reviewed the contestation filing and the evidence both sides would present. In my professional opinion, this case would be costly, time-consuming, and ultimately unsuccessful for the plaintiffs. Derek's lawyer started to object, but Marcus raised a hand. However, I've been authorized to present an alternative. Emma is willing to provide financial assistance to the family, despite having no legal obligation to do so. The assistance comes with conditions. He slid folders across the table to each of them. Inside were detailed proposals I'd spent days perfecting. For Derek, a legal defense fund of $100,000, contingent on full cooperation with authorities and genuine restitution efforts for his victims. For Linda, a monthly stipend of $3,000 for 2 years, enough to live modestly while she found employment. For Kristen, seed funding of $50,000 for a legitimate business venture, provided she disclosed all previous fake partnerships and rebuilt her brand on honesty. For Tyler, bail money and legal representation, conditional on him pleading guilty and serving whatever sentence the court deemed appropriate. The room went silent as they read. I watched their faces, seeing the calculations happen in real time. Pride versus survival. Ego versus reality. This is insulting. Derek spoke first, voice tight with controlled rage. $100,000 doesn't even cover my legal fees for a proper defense. She has millions. You have 2 choices, Marcus said calmly. Accept this offer and withdraw the will contestation, or proceed to court and face full financial discovery. I should mention that discovery would make all your business dealings part of public record. Every property deal, every investor, every transaction for the past decade. Derek's face went pale. His lawyer whispered something urgent in his ear. Mom spoke next, her voice small. Why would you do this, Emma? After how we've treated you? I met her eyes across the polished wood table. Because Dad would have wanted me to. Not because you deserve it, but because letting you destroy yourselves completely doesn't honor his memory. Kristen looked up from her phone, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. I've lost everything. My apartment, my brand, my reputation. $50,000 feels like nothing. Then use it wisely, I said quietly. Build something real this time. Something that doesn't require pretending to be someone you're not. Tyler's voice came through the video call, distorted and desperate. I'll take it. Whatever the conditions, I'll take it. I can't stay in here, Emma. I can't. The conditions are non-negotiable, Marcus interjected. Full cooperation with prosecutors. Guilty pleas where appropriate. Genuine restitution efforts. An absolute prohibition on contacting Emma for additional funds or favors for a period of 5 years. 5 years? Linda's voice cracked. That's half a decade. That's accountability. I stood, preparing to leave. You have 72 hours to decide. Accept the offer and we can start rebuilding on honest foundations. Refuse and proceed with the contestation, but understand that everything will come out in court. Every lie, every scheme, every moment you chose appearance over integrity. I left them there to deliberate, walking out into the Portland afternoon with a strange lightness in my chest. The weight of secrets was lifting, not because I'd revealed them yet, but because the path to revelation was finally clear. James met me at the car, reading my expression accurately. They'll take it. Nobody's that committed to pride when the alternative is total exposure. Probably, I agreed. But the offer isn't really about them. It's about me choosing who I want to be when this is over. We drove back to the office in silence, the city passing by in familiar patterns. I'd spent 12 years building an empire in this city while remaining invisible to the people who should have known me best. The anonymity had served its purpose, given me freedom to grow without the weight of expectations or the interference of people who valued money over meaning. But that phase was ending. Soon, very soon, my family would know exactly who Emma Carter had become. They'd understand that the daughter they dismissed as insignificant had built something far more substantial than any of their facades. The question was whether they'd learn anything from it, That evening, I returned to Carter Tech Solutions to catch up on actual repair work. The shop was my anchor, the reminder of where I'd started and why the work mattered. Mrs. Chen's laptop, Mr. Rodriguez's virus-infected desktop, the high school student's gaming rig that kept overheating. Each represented someone trusting me with something important to them, regardless of my net worth or corporate title. I was elbow deep in a motherboard replacement when my phone rang. Linda. I almost let it go to voicemail, then decided to answer. Emma. She sounded exhausted. I've been thinking about your offer. About everything, really. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. When did you stop trusting me? There was no accusation in the question, just genuine curiosity tinged with sorrow. I set down my tools, considering the question honestly. When you married Derek 6 months after Dad died. When you chose his McMansion over grieving with me in the house where Dad raised us. When you made it clear that your new life had no room for memories of the old one. I was lonely. Her voice broke. Your father was gone and I was terrified of being alone. Derek made me feel safe. He made you feel wealthy. There's a difference. Yes. The admission came out as a whisper. Yes, you're right. I chose money over you, and I've spent 3 years paying for that choice in ways I didn't even recognize until now. What made you recognize it? Losing everything. Having nowhere to go except back to reality. Watching Kristen pretend to be humble on Instagram while actually being humiliated. Seeing Tyler in jail because he thought shortcuts were smarter than honesty. Watching Derek face consequences he spent years thinking he was too clever to face. She paused. And seeing you. Still working in that little shop, still helping people with their computers, still being exactly who you've always been while we were all performing wealth we didn't have. I'm not exactly who you think I am, I said carefully. I know you have integrity. I know your father would be proud. I know I failed you in ways I'm only beginning to understand. That's enough truth for today. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet shop as evening light faded to darkness outside. Tomorrow the family would likely accept my terms. The will contestation would be withdrawn. They'd begin the slow process of rebuilding lives on foundations of honesty instead of illusion. And eventually, when the timing was right, I'd show them the rest of the truth. Not the money, not the company, not the empire I'd built in shadows. But the person I'd become despite their dismissal, because of their underestimation, through the freedom their blindness had granted me. My phone lit up with a message from James. All family members have contacted Marcus Webb to accept the terms. Paperwork being drawn up now. Contestation will be formally withdrawn Monday morning. I allowed myself a small smile. Phase 3 complete. Phase 4 would begin soon, but tonight I had circuit boards to repair and code to review and the quiet satisfaction of watching a plan unfold exactly as designed. The game wasn't over. But the end game had begun, and unlike my family, I could see every move ahead. The paperwork took 6 days to finalize. 6 days during which my family began the uncomfortable process of accepting help on terms they hadn't dictated. Derek signed first, his signature shaky on documents that committed him to full cooperation with federal prosecutors. Linda followed, her stipend agreement notarized in Marcus Webb's office while she cried quietly into tissues that cost more than she could currently afford. Kristen took longest, struggling with the requirement that she publicly acknowledge her previous deceptions before receiving funding for legitimate business ventures. Tyler remained in county jail, his bail posted but release delayed by additional charges that kept surfacing. Apparently his cryptocurrency schemes had extended further than anyone realized, touching victims in 7 states. The prosecutor handling his case called me personally to verify that my offer of legal representation was genuine. You understand he's looking at significant prison time regardless of cooperation, she said. Her voice carried the weariness of someone who'd seen too many young men destroy their futures through greed and shortcuts. I understand. But he deserves competent defense, and his family can't provide it. You're more generous than most would be in your position. I'm practical. Watching him flounder with inadequate representation serves no purpose except prolonging everyone's suffering. After the call ended, I sat in my real office reviewing security footage from Quantum Shield's Singapore facility. The contrast never stopped being surreal. One moment discussing my stepbrother's criminal defense, the next approving infrastructure upgrades for a data center that processed financial transactions for 3 countries. James appeared at my door carrying a tablet and an expression that meant complications. The Wall Street Journal is running a profile on emerging tech leaders in the Pacific Northwest. They want to include Quantum Shield. Standard publicity. What's the complication? They're requesting an interview with the founder. On record, with photos. They've apparently been researching the company's origins and are very interested in the mysterious E. Carter who built a cybersecurity empire while maintaining complete anonymity. I set down my coffee, mind racing through implications. How close are they to making the connection? Not very. They think E. Carter is male, probably mid-40s, possibly based in Seattle rather than Portland. But they're persistent. If they start digging into business registrations and cross-referencing addresses, eventually they'll find Carter Tech Solutions. How long until that happens? Weeks, maybe months. He pulled up the reporter's research notes, obtained through channels I preferred not to examine too closely. She's good but not great. Thorough but not inspired. She'll get there eventually through sheer persistence. I stood, walking to the windows that overlooked downtown Portland. 42 floors below, the city moved through its ordinary rhythms. People working, struggling, succeeding, failing, completely unaware that someone they dismiss as insignificant was watching from above. Set up the interview, I said finally. 3 weeks from now. That gives us time to prepare and gives my family time to stabilize in their new circumstances. You're going to reveal yourself? James couldn't hide his surprise. Just like that? Not just like that. Strategically, intentionally, when the moment serves the larger purpose. My family needs to understand who I became, but they need to be stable enough to process it without it destroying them completely. That's remarkably compassionate considering how they've treated you. It's practical. Shattered people can't learn lessons. They can only survive. I want them capable of understanding what happened and why. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched my family's tentative steps toward honest living. Derek spent 8 hours daily with his legal team, going through every fraudulent transaction, identifying every victim, preparing testimony that would likely send him to prison for 3 to 5 years despite cooperation. His lawyer kept me updated, not because she had to but because she seemed genuinely impressed by his willingness to accept consequences. Linda started job hunting for the first time in 2 decades. I monitored her applications through connections I'd never acknowledged having. Retail positions, administrative work, anything that would provide steady income and dignity. She was qualified for almost nothing, overqualified for everything else by virtue of age and irrelevant experience. But she kept trying, adapting her resume, taking online courses in basic office software. Kristen's public confession went viral in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her tearful video admitting to fake brand partnerships and borrowed luxury generated millions of views, but the comments split between supportive and scathing. She disabled comments after the first 1,000, retreating from social media entirely for the first time in her adult life. The silence seemed to be changing her in ways performance never had. Tyler called me collect from jail on a Thursday afternoon. I accepted the charges, listening to the automated warning about recorded conversations before his voice came through. Emma? His voice sounded younger than I remembered, stripped of the bravado that usually characterized our interactions. I'm here. I've been thinking a lot. About everything. About how I treated you, how I treated everyone. The lawyer you got me, she's good. Really good. She says with full cooperation I might get 12 to 18 months instead of 5 years. That's positive. I don't deserve it. The help, I mean. I was awful to you. Called you pathetic, said you'd never amount to anything, made fun of your shop and your car and your whole life. And you're still helping me. I'm helping you because giving up on people serves no purpose. Whether you deserve it is irrelevant. He was quiet for a moment. The background noise of the jail filtering through, other conversations and clanging metal. Dad used to talk about you. Your real dad, George. He'd tell me stories about how smart you were, how you could fix any computer problem, how you saw patterns other people missed. I was jealous of that. Of how proud he was of you. The revelation surprised me. I'd never known Tyler had noticed my father's pride, let alone felt competitive about it. He believed in potential, I said carefully. In people becoming their best selves regardless of what others expected. I squandered my potential. Took shortcuts, thought I was smarter than everyone else, destroyed opportunities because I wanted fast money instead of earned success. Tyler's voice cracked. I'm going to prison, Emma. Probably for over a year. And I deserve it. Prison isn't the end of your story. It's a consequence, not a conclusion. What you do after matters more than what got you there. How are you so calm about this? Your whole family imploded, we all tried to steal from you, and you're just helping us rebuild like it's normal. It's not normal. But destroying you accomplishes nothing except making me cruel. I'd rather be useful. After the call ended, I sat with the weight of that conversation. Tyler's admission of jealousy, his recognition of squandered potential, his acceptance of consequences. These were signs of actual growth, not performance. Maybe the forced honesty was creating space for genuine change. James knocked, entering with his laptop open. The journal interview is confirmed for next Wednesday, 10 a.m. They want to do it here, at the office, with photos of you in the workspace. Approved. Make sure the space is presentable but authentic. I want them to see the real operation, not a staged version. Your family will know within hours of publication. The article will identify you by name, show your face, connect you to Quantum Shield. There's no going back from that level of exposure. I know. It's time. The days before the interview passed in strange suspension. I continued running my repair shop, helping customers who had no idea they were being served by someone who could buy their house without checking the price. I attended board meetings for Quantum Shield, making decisions that affected thousands of employees across multiple continents. I lived in both worlds simultaneously, knowing one was about to subsume the other. Linda came to the shop on Tuesday, the day before the interview. She'd gotten a job, part-time receptionist at a dental office, and wanted to tell me in person. Her face was different, lighter somehow, despite the obvious exhaustion of working for the first time in 20 years. They hired me despite my age and my gaps in employment. She sounded almost giddy. I start next week, $15 an hour. It's not much, but it's mine. I earned it. That's wonderful, Mom. I meant it genuinely. She looked around the shop, seeing it differently than she had before. You've built something good here. Honest work, helping people, making enough to live on. I'm sorry I never saw the value in it. You saw what you wanted to see. We all do. She picked up a broken tablet from my workbench, turning it over in her hands. When you were little, your father used to say you had a gift for understanding how things worked. Not just computers, but systems, patterns, the way pieces fit together. I thought he was being a proud parent, exaggerating your abilities. He wasn't exaggerating. No. She set down the tablet carefully. He was seeing clearly while I was looking at everything through a filter of what I wanted to be true. I wanted to believe that marrying Derek was smart, that his success was real, that choosing wealth over integrity was pragmatic rather than corrupt. I made myself blind. We're all capable of self-deception. The difference is whether we recognize it and change. I'm trying to change. The words came out fierce, almost desperate. This job, accepting your help, Derek facing prison, all of it is humbling and terrifying and necessary. I'm 60 years old and learning what I should have known at 20. Better late than never. She smiled, fragile but genuine. Your father used to say that too. He was patient with people, believed everyone could grow if given the chance. You're like him in that way. After she left, I locked up early and drove to my penthouse. The interview tomorrow would change everything, would collapse the careful separation I'd maintained between Emma the repair shop owner and Emma the tech CEO. My family would learn the full scope of what I'd built while they'd been dismissing me as insignificant. The question that kept me awake that night wasn't whether they'd be shocked or angry or hurt. It was whether they'd understand why I'd hidden it. Whether they'd recognize that their contempt had been a gift in disguise, giving me freedom to build without interference or expectation. Whether they'd see that being underestimated was the greatest advantage I'd ever received. Morning came too quickly and too slowly. I dressed carefully in clothes that bridged both worlds. Expensive but not ostentatious, professional but not pretentious. The reporter arrived precisely on time, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a recording device that she placed carefully on my desk after asking permission. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview." She settled into her chair with practiced ease. Quantum Shield has been on my radar for years, but getting any information about the founder has been impossible. You've maintained remarkable anonymity in an industry that usually celebrates its leaders. Privacy serves multiple purposes. I kept my voice steady. It allows focus on work rather than personality. It prevents ego from interfering with decision-making. And it creates space to build without constant scrutiny. But you're breaking that privacy now. Why? Because anonymity served its purpose and now transparency serves a different one. The company is stable, successful, established. The work speaks for itself. And there are people in my life who deserve to understand what I've built and why I built it the way I did. She leaned forward, sensing something beneath the surface. People in your life? Family? Among others. The interview continued for 90 minutes, covering everything from Quantum Shield's origins to its future direction. She asked about challenges, successes, the decision to focus on security rather than flashier tech ventures. I answered honestly, giving her the story she needed while carefully controlling what remained private. The photographer took shots of me at my desk, in the server room, standing at the windows overlooking Portland. Each image would tell a story my family had never imagined, of the daughter they'd dismissed commanding an empire they'd never suspected existed. As they packed up to leave, the reporter asked one final question. What would you say to young entrepreneurs who feel overlooked or underestimated? I thought about my father, about my grandmother, about 12 years of building in shadows while people assumed I was barely surviving. I thought about my family scrambling for money while I had more than they could imagine, about the performance I'd maintained and the truth I was about to reveal. Being underestimated is an advantage if you're wise enough to use it. Let people's low expectations become your cover while you build something they can't diminish. And remember that proving yourself to others matters far less than becoming who you're meant to be. She smiled, recognizing a perfect closing quote. The article would run Friday morning, she said. Front page of the business section, online edition publishing Thursday night. 2 days. In 2 days, my family would open their newspapers or their phones and see my face staring back at them, identified as the founder and CEO of a company worth nearly $500 million. They'd understand that while they'd been performing wealth, I'd been quietly accumulating it. That while they'd been dismissing me, I'd been building an empire. The revelation was inevitable now. Carefully orchestrated, perfectly timed, designed for maximum impact and minimum cruelty. I returned to Carter Tech Solutions for the afternoon, helping customers and finishing repairs as if nothing monumental was about to shift. Because in the end, this work mattered as much as anything else I did. These people trusted me with their problems, and that trust was worth more than any article or revelation. But Thursday night, when the online edition published, everything would change. And I was finally ready to let it. The article went live at 8 p.m. Thursday. I was closing up Carter Tech Solutions when my phone started buzzing with notifications. James sent a simple message. It's published. Already trending on business Twitter. I locked the front door and walked to my car without checking. The reveal would cascade through social networks and news aggregators overnight, reaching everyone who needed to see it by morning. There was no rushing the process, no controlling how it unfolded. I'd done my part by telling the truth. Now came the reckoning. Linda called at 6 a.m. Friday. I let it ring through to voicemail, listening to her message while making coffee in my penthouse kitchen. Emma, I just saw the article. I don't understand. Quantum Shield, that's you? The company Derek kept talking about as a potential client, that was yours the whole time? Please call me back. I need to understand what this means. Kristen texted an hour later. Her message was characteristically brief. So you were rich this entire time and just let us humiliate ourselves? Cool. Real nice, sis. Tyler's lawyer called on his behalf. He wants you to know he understands why you did this. Also that he's proud of you. Those were his exact words. I drove to the repair shop despite knowing I wouldn't get any work done. The story had gone viral overnight, picked up by tech blogs and business networks. Photos of me at my modest storefront juxtaposed with images from the Quantum Shield headquarters. The narrative wrote itself. Billionaire hides in plain sight while family collapses. Mrs. Patterson arrived at 9, laptop in hand, wearing an expression of utter confusion. Emma dear, there's an article saying you're some kind of technology mogul. That can't be right, can it? It's accurate. I took her laptop, began the diagnostic process out of habit. But you fix computers here. In this tiny shop. I do both. This is where I started. It reminds me why the work matters. She studied my face, searching for deception and finding none. Your grandmother would have gotten such a kick out of this. She always said you were playing a deeper game than anyone realized. You knew Gran? Honey, Margaret and I played bridge together for 30 years. She talked about you constantly. Showed me articles about Quantum Shield, said her brilliant granddaughter built it. I thought she was confused, mixing you up with someone else. Turns out she was the only one seeing clearly. The morning brought a steady stream of customers, each having read the article, each processing the disconnect between who they'd thought I was and who I actually had been all along. Most seemed more fascinated than upset. A few looked betrayed, as if my wealth somehow invalidated the help I'd given them. Derek appeared at noon, looking smaller in civilian clothes than he had in his expensive suits. The SEC had released him on house arrest while awaiting trial. He stood in the doorway uncertain, perhaps for the first time in his life. Can we talk? I gestured to the back office. He sat heavily, hands clasped between his knees like a penitent. I read the article 3 times trying to understand. You built a $400 million company while living in that studio apartment and driving that ancient car. While I was bragging about deals that didn't exist, you were actually doing the thing I only pretended to do. Success looks different for different people. Don't be diplomatic. I was a fraud and you were the real thing, and I treated you like you were worthless. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. The money you gave me for legal defense, that's pocket change to you, isn't it? It's money I chose to spend helping someone who needed it. The amount relative to my total wealth is irrelevant. Why help me at all? I grabbed you. Tried to intimidate you. Called you names. Demanded money that wasn't mine. You could have let me rot. I could have. But that would have made me cruel rather than just. There's a difference between consequences and cruelty. He nodded slowly, absorbing this. I'm going to prison. 2 to 3 years with the plea deal. When I get out, I'll be 65 with no assets and a criminal record. That's justice. That's one consequence among many. What you do after determines whether you learn from it. The afternoon brought Linda, dressed in her new work uniform from the dental office. She'd been crying but had composed herself, wearing the dignity of someone learning to stand without the crutch of borrowed status. I should have known. She sat where Derek had sat hours earlier. All the signs were there. Your calm when we panicked. Your certainty when we scrambled. The way you never seemed worried about money even though you lived so modestly. A real struggling person would have jumped at Derek's investment advice. You saw what you expected to see. We all do that. I chose what I wanted to see. There's a difference. She twisted her hands together. When your father was alive, he used to tell me you were going to do something extraordinary. I thought he meant you'd marry well or work for a prestigious company. It never occurred to me you'd build the prestigious company. Dad understood that extraordinary doesn't always look how people expect it to. Why didn't you tell us? Any of us? We were your family. You treated me like a charity case. How would telling you have changed that? You'd have either not believed me or immediately started expecting money and influence. Either way, you wouldn't have seen me. Just what I could provide. She flinched but didn't argue. You're right. We would have used you. Just like we tried to use the inheritance. Just like we've used everyone and everything that came within reach. The recognition costs you something. That's growth. We sat in silence, the hum of computers and distant traffic filling the space. Finally she spoke again, voice steady. I start full-time next week. The dentist offered me more hours. It's not glamorous, but it's honest and it's mine. For the first time in 20 years, I'm earning something rather than spending someone else's money. Dad would be proud of that. Her eyes filled but she didn't cry. I know the stipend you're giving me comes from someone who could buy the entire dental practice without noticing the expense. But I'm going to use it wisely. Live within my means. Maybe save something. Build a life that doesn't require pretending to be more than I am. That's all anyone can do. Be honest about where you are and work toward where you want to be. The Wall Street Journal ran a follow-up piece Monday morning. This one focused on my family's situation, the will contestation, the conditional help I'd offered. The reporter had done thorough research, finding court documents and public records that painted the full picture. Readers divided sharply. Some called me vindictive for watching my family struggle while having resources to help. Others praised the boundaries I'd set, the conditions I'd required. I ignored both camps. Public opinion wasn't the point. The truth was simply this: I'd built something real while others built facades. When those facades crumbled, I'd offered help that required honesty rather than performance. Whether that made me generous or cruel depended entirely on which values you prioritized. 3 months later, I stood in Marcus Webb's office signing the final paperwork that dissolved the will contestation permanently. My family had honored every condition. Derek was in minimum security prison, teaching financial literacy to other inmates. Linda had been promoted to office manager at the dental practice. Kristen had launched a modest consulting business helping small brands with authentic marketing. Tyler was serving his sentence while taking online courses in ethical business practices. Marcus handed me the final document with something close to approval in his expression. Your grandmother would have been remarkably proud. Not of the money or the company, but of how you handled all this. She taught me that transformation requires seeing people clearly. Including yourself. I left his office and drove to the cemetery where my father and grandmother were buried side by side. The headstones were simple, elegant, chosen by people who understood that value wasn't measured in ostentation. I sat on the grass between them, speaking quietly to the stone and the memories. I did what you taught me, Dad. Built something real. Stayed true to myself. Helped others without letting them define me. And Gran, I used the inheritance exactly as you intended. Not just the money, but the lesson. That being underestimated is only a disadvantage if you let it limit you. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of cut grass and distant rain. Somewhere in the city, my family was learning to live honestly. Somewhere in my pocket, my phone held messages from Quantum Shield employees, customers at the repair shop, reporters wanting follow-ups. But here, in this quiet space, I was simply Emma Carter. Daughter, granddaughter, builder of things that lasted. The woman who'd learned that the greatest power came not from being seen, but from seeing clearly. From understanding that revenge and justice were different things. From knowing when to hide and when to reveal. I stood, brushed grass from my jeans, and walked back to my car. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new moments requiring the wisdom my father and grandmother had worked so hard to instill. But today, I'd honored their memory by being exactly who they'd raised me to be. Someone who built empires in shadows and revealed them in light, who helped without enabling, who set boundaries while maintaining compassion. The city spread below as I drove home, full of hidden stories and quiet transformations. Mine was just one among millions, remarkable only in its ordinariness once you looked beneath the surface. And that, I thought, was exactly how it should be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.